Coming up in this episode,
the people were taking rice in their mouth, and as I came past, some red wine and spitting it at me. So it was quite hostile, and there was some very aggressive paintings done. Roche Bastardo, Roche for Casa, Il Monstro, Roche. There was some incredible kind of hostile banners out there, and I was basically protected in the start and the finish. My mechanic got out of my bike for fear somebody would sabotage my bike.
hello and welcome to Cafe Aficionado. I'm Sir Bradley Wiggins. I'm joined as ever by my water carrier, my bidon carrier, Graham Wilgoss. Graham is joining me as ever. Hello, Graham.
Hello, mate. Your barista at Cafe Aficionado.
My domestique.
Lead out man. I've been downgraded from lead out man last time out.
Now, today is a very, very special episode. I've got one of my childhood heroes on the show, the great Stephen Roche, of course, one of only three men to do the Triple Crown, which, of course, is the Giro, the Tour, and the World Championships. Look, today's going to be a good one.
In the same season.
In the same season,
importantly. Yes. Yeah. Today's going to be a great one. It's a little bit of history, and we're in the Pyrenees today. We're tying it to the Col d'Aubisque, which is a climb that you're very, very familiar with.
Yeah.
It's the third most ridden climb at the Tour de France. Middle of the Pyrenees, we should place ourselves about 30 kilometres from Tarbes and Pau, two very, very famous Tour de France towns. An HC climb just over 17 kilometres long, an average of 7.1%, but it typically comes, depending on which way round the tour goes, typically comes towards the end, either of the second week or the third week, when things start to get tough.
Yes.
The Aubisque made its debut in the 1910 Tour. Octave Lepise famously went over the top and shouted to the organisers that famous line, "You are all murderers." Or do you know this in French?
No.
I think it's I'm going to mangle my French now.
Go on. Give me some flavour.
Tu étais des assassins.
Tu étais l'assassine.
Something
like that.
Yeah. And just to bring us right up to date with the Aubisque as well, the last time it was used at the Tour de France, do you remember this?
2022?
Correct.
Yes.
When?
It was, of course, the stage that Eunice put a little bit of time, more than a minute, into Tadej Pogacar.
Bang on.
Which is probably one of the last times we ever saw that happen to Tadej on his current form.
Yes.
But, very interesting, an interesting reference point.
On his way to winning his first yellow jersey. So, needless to say, steeped in Tour history, this particular climb.
It's a tough one.
Which is what we're going to get into with our guest. Before we do, quick reminder on the socials and to hit follow on Cafe Aficionado wherever you get your podcasts. Watch us on YouTube and join us on all the usual social platforms at Sir Brad's Cafe.
That's it.
Now then, let's get into it, shall we?
Yes, let's do it. So today on the show, as I said earlier already, we've got the great Stephen Roche, childhood hero of mine, or one of my childhood heroes. His career came to an end. Funny enough, when I went to my first Tour de France to watch, I was stood on the Champs-Élysées in 1993. I stood on the entrance to the Place de la Concorde when Miguel Indurain came across with his Banesto team in yellow. Gianni Bugno was on his wheel as world champion. And it was Stephen's last Tour de France. And Stephen gave a great interview at the finish with Gary Imlach or Paul Sherwin, I think it was. Stephen was in tears with his Brico glasses on because of Carrera team. And he'd finished 13th in his last tour. And I'll never forget Stephen saying, I did 13 tours, finished 13th in my first tour and finished 13th in my last Tour de France. And of course, that was the great Stephen Roche, who I'm pleased to say is on the show, Graham.
Stephen, welcome to Cafe Aficionado, Triple Crown winner.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Excellent to have you. Brad, where do you want to start? Because
where do we start?
I'll
tell you the good place to start is I want to get Stephen's view on last year and Tadej Pogacar, because he's, of course, in a very, very special club now with you and Eddie Merckx as the only man, well, the only one of only three men to win the Triple Crown, the Giro, the Tour and the World Championships in the same year. And there was a great photo of you at the World Championships last year when he achieved that, Stephen.
Yeah, it's quite amazing because everybody was talking up to the fact that Pogacar was probably going to, win the triple by winning the World Championships because the race route was suiting him. But nobody thought of the photograph and the souvenir photograph. So I'm not kind of a photograph or a souvenir hunter, but when I saw nobody was making the the attempt to catch the occasion. I went behind the scenes back to the press zone, and Pogačar was there on his own, just finishing off washing down his face. And I said to Mario Giannetti, his manager, I said, Mauro, what about getting a photograph of myself and Pudge together? He said, wow, what a great opportunity. You guys, I mean, he's succeeding you. So that was the first anybody mentioned it. So we took a few photographs, a few selfies, and believe it or not, those selfies went around the world.
I mean, what was it like for you being there that day? Did it bring back memories of Villach, Austria? And of course, when you won the world title, because I mean, it was a very different way that you won that world title, attacking the late stages. Sean Kelly was in that group. It was quite some star-studded group, was it? And you were the red hot favourite in many ways because everyone knew what you were setting out to achieve that day.
Well, after winning the Giro and the Tour, I wasn't. I was basically looked upon as being, well, Roach is going to be tired, so he's not going to be too performant for the Worlds. And of course, everybody before was saying, "Oh, the Worlds this year is a flat stage, a flat Worlds. It's for Sean Kelly or Argentine for sprinters." So myself, I never actually put it in my mind that it's possible. And strange enough, when we got to the Worlds 2 days before, we went around the circuit, and I said for the first time, this circuit could suit me, because it wasn't just kind of once up a hill. It was like 18 or 20 laps of the circuit with 2 climbs every lap. So I was saying, like, everyone's building this up for a sprinter's race, but after 80 and 20 times up here, it's going to be very, very hard. So for the first time in 87, I kind of put in my mind, okay, this could be for me. Just keep it quiet and try and stay upright, stay out of trouble, and see what happens. But it was very, very warm, and it was extremely warm when we got there first. And I'm sure, the gods above heard me, because I was saying, gee, if this weather stays this hot, there's no way I'm going to perform tomorrow, because I always suffered in the heat. And in fact, on the day of the race, it was raining, like, crazy, hard, heavy, and very, very cold. So it suited me and my state of fatigue.
I want to take you back to the beginning of 1987, if I may, and an Italian racing for an Italian team, racing certainly to begin with for an Italian leader, Brad, in the great Roberto Vicentini, yes, who at that time was reigning champion for Carrera. So going into that Giro, it's fair to say that you weren't expected to do what you did, in breaking away and going out on your own, doing your own thing, and eventually ending up in the Maglia Rosa.
Well, Roberto won the Giro in '86, and of course he was the local boy, and I rode very hard for him in '86 to help him win the Giro. And we were reasonably good friends because we had the same hobby. We used to like, apart from cycling, we liked fast cars. And Roberto was always buying a new car or testing a new car, and always brought along to the race so I could try it out. So we had a reasonably good relationship. But before the Giro, I had won Tour de Valencia early in the year, second in Paris-Nice, won a stage or two, second in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. I'd been to the front for the whole season. And then before the Giro, I won the Tour of Romandy, winning 3 stages. So I felt out the back of that I deserved kind of a co-leadership with Roberto, which David Boyfava, politely agreed to. So in the prologue, I think Roberto beat me, but then I won the time trial down to Poggio, and then the team won the team time trial. But because I was the best placed in the team, I got the pink jersey. So, everybody rode for me, so to speak, for the first few days when I had the jersey, until the day when Roberto pulled it back off me on the time trial. And that day I kind of looked around me and said, gee, those 8 days or so in pink were beautiful. I was a kind of a hero. And now all of a sudden now I'm a nobody again. So I'm watching television, the after tour commentary, and Roberto's being asked, well, Roberto, you got the pink jersey back in your back now again. So I suppose you got the leadership role now. And Roche will ride for you, and when Roche goes to the tour, you will go and help him. So Roberto, honestly said, well, yeah, sure, Steve's going to ride for me, but I'm not going to the tour. I'm going to the beach. So I thought, okay, well, let's be honest about it. So, what can we do about this? Can we? I can't attack him because he's my teammate, but I could try and work on him a little bit. And he's always a very nervous, very uptight, and he's very easy to destabilize. So I thought, okay, well, I looked at the road book and I thought, okay, well, he obviously buried himself here in that time trial, expecting a handy day tomorrow, which is wasn't a very hard day, but very undulating. So I thought, okay, well, he's not going to be expecting anybody to attack him tomorrow. What if somebody did attack him? Not me, but whatever. So I waited for an opportunity, and there was a group went away, and no Carrera in there. So I thought, okay, well, it's not my role to go after that group, but nevertheless, if I could get across to it, wouldn't I be defending my team's jersey? So I said to my teammate Eddie Shippers to bring me to the front before the descent, and he pulled over on the first corner. I went straight through, and I went down the descent without looking in the mirrors. I didn't realize, Roberto wasn't following me, but that was basically the plan. But when I got to the bottom, I joined the group in front, and Roberto's group was like a minute behind me. So I thought, okay, well, at least now I'm in front. The Panasonics can ride for Miller, Bianchi's can root for Argentine, but at least my own team haven't got to ride. But it's a bit suicidal as well because there was still like 40 odd kilometers to go, and finish uphill up in Zapada. So it wasn't like all one until my team car came along and said, Stephen, what are you doing? So I said, well, I was defending the jersey, there was nobody in front. So, I slipped off the front on the descent, and, to my surprise, nobody followed me on the descent. So I was told, listen, the whole Carrera team are riding behind you. You better stop. So I said, well, why are they riding? Was Roberto's panicking? So we'll wait for the Bianchi to ride, wait for Panasonic to ride, and it'll be okay. So no, you don't understand, Stephen, you must stop. So I said, okay, well, just go back and tell Roberto, I'll stop if he stops, but as long as he's riding, I'm riding on the front, and I'm going to ride harder now. It's war. So we had quite a battle from there on to the finish in Zapada, which was the Italians named it high treason in Zapada. The Italians call it.
So I imagine the Tifosi, the Italian fans, I imagine you weren't, maybe you were public enemy number one in Italy, but I imagine you weren't the favourite on the road at that point.
Well, during the stage, it was quite okay, except for climbing up Zapada. Roberto actually caught me, and Rominger had gone away with, I forget he went away with, but anyway, he was, wasn't far off the pink jersey. So I had to react, and when I reacted, Roberto got dropped. And in the end, I got onto almost back onto the group in the finish, and held the jersey by about 4 seconds from Rominger. But Roberto lost like 4 or 5 minutes. And I always remember he came across the line and stopped right on the foot of the podium, looked up at me and said, tonight somebody's going home. Stasera qualcuno va a casa, he said to me. So I went like this, shh, like this, So of course I was taken away by the police. Nobody wanted to talk to me. I couldn't talk to journalists. And actually I was up to my bedroom window, and on the terrace there was a guy called Angelo Zimignan, who later became the race director of the Giro. He was a journalist at the time. I said, Angelo, come here. I want to give you my story, because I think Roberto's giving his side of the story, but he's telling, the way he saw it. So I gave him my side of the story anyway, and he politely says to me, Stephen, I totally believe you, but I've got one problem. The paper is closed for tomorrow. My articles are done. So if you survive tomorrow, I can guarantee you'll have a good article explaining your side the following day.
Am I right in saying you got rice and wine spat at you as well from the roadside?
Yeah, the next day it was unbelievable. Like there was the police motorbikes were riding in front of me, and their feet out to keeping the crowds back. And people were taking rice in their mouth and as I came past, some red wine and spitting it at me. So it was quite hostile, and there was some very aggressive um, um, paintings done. Roche Bastardo, Roche Casa, Il Monstro, Roche. There was some incredible kind of hostile banners out there.
Yeah, I remember the last stage as well. You wore sunglasses, didn't you? And it was very unusual for riders to wear sunglasses in those days. But I
Yeah.
remember reading something at the time saying that you felt that you were hiding your eyes behind from the noise of the crowds in the last stage there when you won the
Well,
race.
I was trying to stay focused, and and also afraid of getting something in my eye. People spitting at you and everything else. It was very hostile. I mean, but I found this kind of inner courage where I was saying to the tifosi, I was saying, like, do what you want, but I ain't going home. So whereas if you were to describe that kind of incident to me, having not lived it, I would have said, yeah, I'd have been the first bus home.
Am I right in thinking, or am I right in saying that you grabbed, at one point in the race, you grabbed Vicentini's handlebars as well?
Yeah. Well, going over, I think it was the Col de Marmalade, I think it was. He was, it was quite ridiculous because he was riding like one side of the road with a line of guys behind him. I'm riding on the far side of the road with kind of line behind me. And going over the top, he brought me over towards the ravine now. And so he was kind of physically pushing me towards the edge. So I put my hand on his handlebar. I said, Roberto, if I go, you come with me. So, but we pushed him off anyway, and we went down the descent, down to the finish.
Okay, so Vicentini eventually goes home. You go on to win the 1987 Giro, so that's part one of the Triple Crown in the bag. That brings us on to that year's tour.
Yeah.
The 1987 Tour de France.
Well, it was a great tour. I mean, the big French hope that year, of course, is Jean-Francois Bernal, who won the mountain time trial on Mont Ventoux that year. And I think almost thought he had it in the bag that he'd won the race. But little did he know that, of course, I still remember Stephen when Stephen won that year. Of course, there's a famous battle on La Plagne, of course, as well with Delgado. And those famous words from Philip Liggett, it looks like Stephen Roche. It is Stephen Roche coming out the mist. I mean, those things are iconic in the Tour de France, and steeped in my memory as a child watching the race. And then, of course, Stephen, you paid heavily for those efforts, didn't you? I seem to remember you lost time. Was it the day after? Or the day after you attacked on the descent, didn't you? And made time up again when they weren't they thought he was going to be tired after that stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a great race.
So it was stage 14, the Aubisque, featured in that year. That was one of the climbs on the way to Les Ardennes. Stephen, you finished 10th that day, but as Brad was just saying, it was the stage to La Plagne, which started with the Galibier, moved on to the Madeleine, which I think is where you took the opportunity because you're famous for being a bit of a tactician, or you were famous for being a bit of a tactician on the road as well. But it's the Madeleine where you really took your opportunity to attack Delgado.
Well, actually, the story started a little before that, actually, because we started on Bourdoisin and up over the Galibier and Telegraph, and going up, the Colombians kept attacking. And of course, the rest of us were saying, hey, guys, take it easy. There's a long way to go. Take it easy. You're going to send half the peloton home at the end. They're going to be outside the time limit. So anyway, they kept going. So going over the top, we had a chat with like Charlie Mutte and a few of the other guys. And we said, listen, we got to do something here, because if we don't do anything, they're going to do the very same thing on the Madeleine. So we went down the descent quite quickly, because the Colombians were noted for not being great descenders. But at the same time, Delgado's teammates had gotten dropped going up. So he found himself quite isolated. I saw an opportunity in the valley before the Madeleine to, take a risk. And I got into the small group, but I quickly learned that these guys weren't going to help me, because they weren't capable of going to the speed I had to go. So I left them on the Madeleine on my own, knowing it's a bit suicidal, but you gotta try. And they caught me down at the foot of La Plagne, where Fignon attacked with Chosas, I think, and went on to win the stage. But there was another race behind them with myself and Pedro, because I knew that if Pedro, when Pedro caught me, he was going to go again. before I had recovered, which he did. But I knew if I tried going with him, then I wouldn't see the top because he'd go and go and go again. So I basically said, okay, well, let's just let him go, because at this stage I kind of identified that Delgado was my main rival for the Tour, and there was a time trial the second last day in Dijon. I hadn't got a great team to help me in the climbs where he had. So I thought, okay, well, I reckon in the final time trial I could maybe pull a minute out of Delgado on a good day, and so I have a minute to play around with approximately. So I said, okay, let him go on the La Plagne, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute and 10, a minute and 15. And he's taking time quite quickly. So I said, okay, I better do something here. So I accelerated a bit, and I found I was holding him at like 120, 125. So I thought, okay, well, maybe he's either, whacked out and can't go any faster, or he's content himself to have 120 up on myself. So I thought, okay, well, I quickly realized that he wasn't putting any more time out of me. So I thought, okay, well, what I'll do is for the last 4K to go, like there was no radios in those days. There was very hard to get time checks. Couldn't hear time checks from the car. There was so many people around. Couldn't see anybody on the road because there was so much people on the side of the road. So with 4K to go, 4.5K to go, I just started burying myself. And I found energy where I don't know where I found it from, but it's amazing. And I buried myself, hoping to go back within 30 seconds up to him. And it was only when I came around the final corner and I saw Jacques Godet's car, red car, and kind of a symbol in front of him. And I was confused because I thought it couldn't be him. It couldn't be him. Is it him? It couldn't be him. And what happened, in fact, was the journalists they had no news from me, because there was one television camera on Fignon winning the stage, one camera on Bernard getting dropped, one camera on Delgado winning the Tour. So because I had done my breakaway on the Madeleine, they thought Roche is cooked, so there's no point in having a camera on him. So I kind of caught everybody by surprise. And when I arrived with the final 200 or 300 meters, everybody started running to Delgado to get his comments on how he feels about winning the Tour. And of course, Phil Liggett then jumps up, and after seeing me coming, he said, that's Roche. That looks like Roche. It is Roche. So the journalists kind of stopped in their path and all ran towards me. So nobody would kind of hand me a towel or, how you doing, Stephen? It was all basically, what happened? Where'd you come from? And I had no energy. I just fell over on my bike and I couldn't move. It was quite horrific, because I remember lying on the ground and the doctor saying to me, Stephen, move your legs. The cars are getting very close. And I couldn't move. I was basically, I could move my eyes. I couldn't talk. They gave me oxygen, but it was quite a scary situation.
I remember that they were giving Stephen oxygen at the finish. There's great photos, And at that time, the Tour was very different to what it is now. It was just a free-for-all at the finishes. And it in some ways was the essence of the Tour, was the proximity you could get to the riders and the great riders as well. But, that particular occasion is steeped in the history of the Tour de France, in the modern history of the Tour de France. And it's one of those occasions that we very rarely see. And of course, the story around it, Stephen having won the Giro before, and that was the day he won the Tour in many ways, the day he psychologically beat Delgado. And even more so the day after, as Stephen will probably tell us now, when he attacked again, which was the thing they least expected him to do, was attack again the day after.
So, Stephen, you had 45 minutes of oxygen at the top of La Plagne as well. Is that right?
Yeah, don't know how long it was, but they put me in the back of the car then, and basically took me to the Tour Clinique. And I always remember, and some close people remember also, that when a journalist, Patrick Chen, came over to me while I was on the back of the car, lying on a stretcher, and he says, "Well, Stephen, can you please just maybe reassure your fans that you're okay?" So I said, yeah, everything's okay. But the femme tout de suite, so not ready for a woman straight away. So my wife was happy, but anyway, I was quite dead, and I go back to my hotel room then. And later on, and I was in bed, and my masseur came along and said to me, "Stephen, what do you want for dinner?" So my plan was I go down to dinner and walk in as if nothing was happening, and everybody was saying, "Stephen, great ride today. whatever happens tomorrow, you've done a great ride today. Unfortunately, tomorrow is another mountain stage arriving into Morzine over Jutland. It'll be impossible for you to recover, but nevertheless, a fabulous stage today. And in my own mind, I'm saying, you wait and see. My race is not over yet. So my plan was to try and get away from Delgado on the Jutland and try and put even just 1 second into him, because my strategy was that I felt that I could beat him in the time trial, but I wanted to try and destabilize him a little bit as well. So by him seeing me being taken away in an ambulance one day, next day if I can put 1 second into him, he said, "This guy is unhuman." He was yesterday lying on with oxygen. Now he's putting time into me. This guy is going to be impossible to beat in the time trial. The next day we went along with on the stage. I said to my teammate shippers to bring me to the front. So he brought me to the front, and I basically went in the first corner. I left the group, and I put 18 seconds into Pedro, and finished second on the stage. But I put 18 seconds into Pedro, and for me, I was like nailing his coffin. That was me kind of saying to Pedro, you haven't seen her all yet. Wait till you see me in the time trial on Saturday. I'm going to beat you again.
So on that note, I want to take you back to the 1985 tour. 85 being perhaps most famous for that battle between Hinault and Le Monde. And 85, of course, Stephen, was where you won the stage 18A on the Col d'Aubisque.
Yeah, that must have been one of the very last split stages on the Tour de France. I know there was one in 89.
Yes,
certainly in 85. Stephen actually won in a skin suit that day, if I remember rightly.
Statement of intent,
yeah.
Skin suit.
Was it 50? How long was the stage, Graham?
52K.
52 kilometres, finishing on the Aubisque. Stephen riding number 101, which of course was the number I won the Tour de France with. And but what a star-studded group. Stephen alone off the front, but star-packed group behind Fignon, Le Monde, of course, Bernard Hinault in yellow. Those were the great days. That was my era watching the Tour de France growing up in the 80s and 90s, and a very different time. But Stephen, of course, winning in La Redoute's first stage win on the race, and of course by then French teams are expected to win stages on the Tour. A lot of pressure building within that team, and Stephen pulled it off in the split stage.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen, you don't go into a stage wearing a skin suit, and it's...
he must have been the first rider to have worn a skin suit in... We always thought we were at Sky.
Sure.
I think Stephen must have been a good 20 years before we did.
Yeah.
But that was clearly a target for you that day. You knew that you had something in you. You knew that you fancied yourself that day.
Well, actually, no, not really. Would you believe it was actually Raphael Gimignani, who was like the Dave Brailsford of today. He was Gimignani was, of course, an ex bike rider himself, and a big mouth, a big talker. He managed Jacques Anquetil. But incredible experience, and he was the director sportif of La Redoute in '85. And when we went to the Tour de France presentation in October '84, and they announced these two split stages, Gimignani says Roche is going to win those two stages. So I'm like, shush, shut up! Don't start putting the pressure on me, Gem. No. You're going to win those.
He said you were going to win them both. So the 52K stage in the morning and the 80K plus stage in the afternoon.
Exactly. Yeah. He said that Roche is like a TGV. Once he gets a gap, his train is so fast, nobody will catch him. So I'm saying, Jem, please don't put pressure on me. Please back off. So right up to the Tour, anyway, Jem kept his pressure on me to try and win these two stages, and convincing me that the Col de of the Aubisque and the Solaire, with my kind of climbing, was a no-brainer. I had a really good pedaling style. This kind of climb suited me. The important thing was to get a gap. Once I got a gap, nobody would catch me. That was Jem's theory anyway. So, but to make it all kind of, worse, okay, I was doing well on that tour anyway. But Jem arrives in the morning of the time trial and gives me this skin suit that he had specially made up for me in silk. I'm saying, Jem, don't ask me to wear that. That's, here you are for the last 6 months or 7 months saying Roche is going to win the two stages of the Aubisque. And now if Roche comes to the start line with a skin suit, they say this guy has lost the plot, So anyway, I put it on. but I put a normal jersey on over it because I was embarrassed to go to the start with a skin suit. So before we actually hit the Aubisque, we had a small 6 or 7 or whatever 10k loop to do before coming back to the Col de l'Aubisque. So I kept this normal jersey on me for the full lap, and then once we got around to the real start line again, I took off my jersey and threw it to the side of the road, and I was in my skin suit. So for me, it was maybe I won out of fear, thinking that Jem is banging the steering wheel behind me, encouraging me on. But in the afternoon, of course, I was a marked man in the afternoon, and Regis Simon, who was my teammate, won the stage in the afternoon. So even though I didn't win the 2 stages, La Redoute did win both stages.
Brad, before we go any further, just explain to us the benefits of a skin suit over a regular jersey. And
I mean, nowadays it's common practice, isn't it? And of course, the reason for it is aerodynamics, I guess. Less so climbing, because of the speeds. You're not so climbing so much now. But I mean, it's common practice now for everyone to wear a skin suit. But in those days, I imagine there was more psychological gains as well to be made from having, especially something that's made out of silk, as opposed to as baggy and woolly as the jerseys were in the mid-80s.
Sure.
I mean, it's quite a considerable difference wearing the standard jersey and the silk skin suit in those days. Nowadays, there's not much between a race fit jersey and a skin suit. But as we know, everything's gone aerodynamic, and that would have been the first time really in those days. And of course, the wool jerseys that were still around in the mid-80s would carry a lot more water and a lot more less breathable than something like what Stephen was wearing.
Yeah, of course.
But the psychological placebo effect
Yeah.
of feeling faster on the bike and not having a wool jersey definitely would have a benefit.
Brad, as we know, the Aubisque has got tons of stories outside of yours and Stephen's era, not least a very, very famous one from Wim van Est in 1951, which we will get to, where he had to exit the Tour after falling 70 metres into a ravine. Something to look forward to. We'll come to that very, very shortly. Brad, we're back at Café Aficionado with our guest today, Stephen Roche, talking about the Col d'Aubisque in the Pyrenees. Some excellent stories, the history of this climb. So let's go back to 1951, chaps, and Wim van Est falling into the ravine on the descent of the Aubisque. Having got up there in good time, he was first Dutchman to win, or to wear, the yellow jersey. Having done so, he tried to get on Fiorenzo Magni's wheel and couldn't hold it. Not a great bike handler, and managed to plunge 70 metres into a ravine.
Yeah, and what's interesting is because he was 70 metres down a ravine, the only way to get him out was, of course, to tie lots of bike tyres and inner tubes together in order to create a rope to pull him out, which is quite amazing now, considering you'd have mountain rescue on the scene and things like that, and helicopters.
In minutes, yeah.
And it just shows you just how basic a need to get someone out of a ravine, that you'd have to tie inner tubes and tyres together just to get the guy out. But of course, it created a great advertising and marketing campaign for what happened next with this guy, wasn't it?
Oh, it did. So the ad campaign, because he was wearing a Pontiac watch, so Pontiac signed him up pretty quickly afterwards, took advantage of this great photo of Wim van Est on the side of the mountain, sort of dazed and confused, but fortunately kind of sitting upright, almost in tears, bruised and battered. And he's wearing, you can just see he's wearing a Pontiac watch in the kind of bottom corner of this.
And it's still intact.
And it's still intact. And the campaign slogan was, "I fell 70 metres off a mountain. My heart almost stopped, but my watch didn't."
Yeah, there you go.
Buy Pontiac watches. Yeah. So it's
great story.
It's a funny old story from a bygone era where.
But one of those stories from the Tour de France that adds. It's why we're here, isn't it? It's so many great stories like that and this historic climb that we're talking about today, and one of the events that happened on it, which could have took someone's life, but didn't, and added to it the history of the Tour de France.
You've never had any sort of ad deal off a sort of mishap?
Nothing.
No. Stephen, anything to add to this particularly unfortunate episode in the history of the Aubisque?
No, the Aubisque has been kind of judge to judge and ruler for a lot of cyclists. You know what I mean? There's never been an Aubisque stage, I think, without having some kind of drama around it.
Well, drama's a great way to move it on to 2007 and Rasmussen, who, like Van Est, went home wearing the yellow jersey, or went home having worn the yellow jersey, in very, very different circumstances. Yeah. And so just give us a little bit, Brad, in your history with the Aubisque.
You know, it's one of those climbs that I wasn't too familiar with, but I'm obviously it springs to mind because in 2007 we arrived at the finish a couple of days before the end of the Tour de France, and found out at the end of the stage it's where my teammate Christian Morenier was arrested for testing positive for synthetic testosterone. He'd been using testosterone patches and was taken off the top of the climb by police back to the police station. And when we finished as a team, we were all escorted in our team bus back to the police station in the centre of Pau. At that time, as you remember, the race was really, going to shit, and lots had happened. Rasmussen, Astana, Vinokurov. Of course, this came the year after, in 2006, when Basso and Ulrich went down in the Fuentes scandal at the start of that race. So it was shades of 98 and that 98 Tour and Festina and stuff. And I think it was a lot of panic stations. And us as a French team, Monsieur Migraine, who was the owner of the Cofidis team, decided to withdraw us from the race that evening and sent us all home. So that was, of course, where I had a great tour that year. I was 4th in the prologue in London, 5th in the time trial. I'd spent the day up the road on Tom Simpson's anniversary, the 13th of July, 207-kilometre breakaway. And it was really my breakthrough year Tour de France. And subsequently, we got sent home 3 days before the end, just as family are starting to pack their bags to come out and see you in Paris at the Champs-Élysées. And
flights out to Paris all sorted.
It was, and what had been, on a personal level, a successful tour for me. Huge disappointment. I was pissed off. I did want nothing to do with Cofidis at that time. I remember throwing all my Cofidis clothes in the bin at the airport. I borrowed a T-shirt from David Miller, who was staying in our hotel. So I had a Sonia Duval T-shirt on and travelled home.
Which is arguably worse.
Looking back, in hindsight. But I came back and Brailsford had advised me to hold a press conference at the Manchester Velodrome to, detach myself and separate myself from anything that was potentially upcoming, because we didn't know that stage whether other riders in the team were or wasn't. And as it turned out, Cofidis, still to this day and was a completely different team to the one that went down with Van den Broek and the Miller affair and all that Gaumont. And you can see how the team felt about things like that. Just a couple of years after, of course, the whole affair with David Miller and Van den Broek and Philippe Gaumont and so, very disappointing on a personal level, but it all ended on the Col d'Aubisque.
Stephen, you were on commentary duties, I think I'm right in saying, for the 2007 Tour. What was it like to commentate on?
Very, very complicated. Sometimes you kind of feel a bit naive. You have a role to play because you have a lot of credibility. So, you have credibility there. You have to kind of be careful what you say. And no matter what you say, whether you're defending the riders or, speaking too much, you're always going to be, criticized for whatever you say. But I always try to keep an open mind on it and basically protect the riders because, a lot of things got generalized, I think. And whereas there was a certain amount of people, maybe not doing things properly, but I think I was a bit naive myself. Maybe that's what was going on. But nevertheless, I tried to defend the riders because we are above all cyclists. We've been there. We know what it's like. So it's very complicated.
When you're on the road, are you thinking at that point we're not going to make the end of the tour the way this is going?
At that point, day to day, it was a different story every day, and it all happened. Once someone goes, then obviously there becomes all this hysteria and raids in hotels and things, and also it's. Things get blown out of proportion when some things aren't greater than they appear to be. They get sensationalized in the press. So you're unawares of what's actually going on. Because as it looked on paper, our Cofidis team getting taken to the police station in the bus and our rooms raided looked greater than it looked a bigger reason than it appeared. And actually, it was more procedure at that point for us. It was the police appearing to do something to be cracking down on this. But it was just, again, part of the history of the Tour, and it was an open wound at that point from the 98 affair. And as we've seen over years, there's always an incident of some sort. And 2008 was no different with the Bernard Cole stuff and the Italian rider at that time, Rico, who won a couple of stages that year in 2008. So this lingered for a couple of years after that. And by the time we got to 2009, of course, Lance was back on the race. And it was just, So the Tour de France has been an open wound to itself from 98 onwards, really.
Brad, should we do the ultimate cyclist? Feels like it's time.
Definitely.
So we've spun, Stephen, what we do each time on Cafe Aficionado is we spin the rear wheel of fate, the rear wheel of destiny, and we pick a particular facet that, if you put all of these physical and mental things together, will create the ultimate rider, the ultimate cyclist. And this time round, in your honour, we are going with the ultimate tactician. So what I'd like you to do with Brad is I'm going to give you 1 minute in which I want you to think of a rider who comes to mind when you think of a sort of a tactically brilliant mastermind on the road, and I want you to have it out. Who's gonna come out on top? Who's your pick? Brad, we'll start with you. Who's your pick for the ultimate tactician?
Ultimate tactician, I'm going to go with Greg LeMond. Greg, in his latter years, post-accident, the shooting accident, couldn't rely on his natural talent as much as he could pre the shooting, but still went on to win a world title, a couple of Tour de France's, and in some years, particularly in '89 when he was riding for ADR, had no team assistance. This man was riding out there on his own and came up against a very rejuvenated Laurent Fignon in '89, who'd won the Tour de France twice in the early '80s. And had a pretty couple of quiet years, but was riding with a very, very strong System U squad, managed by, of course, the great Guimard. And had to, Greg had to really rely on his tactical, astuteness, his innovation with the time trial innovations that he brought to the race and brought to cycling with the tri-bars, the first man to use them. So I'm going to go with Greg LeMond for this particular, and of course Stephen Roche with Greg.
Stephen, Greg LeMond is on the table. What can you raise us?
Greg, if you'd asked me to put a name in a bag before, listening to Brad, I would have said also Greg LeMond. But also as he's put down Greg LeMond, I put Laurent Fignon.
He was nicknamed the Professor, wasn't he, Laurent Fignon?
Yeah, Laurent was, he was an incredible guy, able to, throw down the gauntlet, analyze his adversaries, the opponents. He'd be able to kind of turn around, whether it be a time trial, mountain stage, coming down a hill. He's the kind of guy you get into a break with, and there's no questions asked. It's basically we're all riding for the same thing here. So there's 10 of us here, so I have one chance in 10 of winning. Better than being back in the peloton where you have one chance in 100 of winning. So always kind of riding for today. Today is today. Tomorrow we see what happens. But looking for opportunities and creating opportunities. Always looking to, I won't say make a deal, but not afraid to speak to fellow riders, maybe not in the same team, but to pull something together. But for me, Laurent was one of the biggest tacticians of our generation. Of course, Greg, it was, of course, brilliant, but Laurent Fignon would have been, for me, another guy that was very, very capable and an incredible tactician.
Brad, obviously you had the benefit of race radio, but how difficult is it to know, even with race radio, how difficult is it to know what's going on in the rest of the race?
It's okay knowing what's going on, but I still think you're reliant on who's on the end of the radio. And in my era, it was Sean Yates, who was another phenomenal, kind of gave you so much information, knew the roads, knew the riders, had a great awareness of racing. And for Sean was someone who had to struggle through the mountains and things, but Sean had a great eye for where to make up time and things like that. And so I think with the radios are still reliant, you're still heavily reliant on who's on the end of the radio, because if you're listening to directions from someone who's on the end of the radio and they're the wrong directions, it's still... So radios take away your ability to think for yourself. And of course, before radios, riders had to do that. So I think that's the only difference it makes, really. You have to think for yourself without radios.
I think you'll be pleased to know this week I'm going with Greg LeMond. So it's about time. Stephen, I'm sorry, I've got to give it to Greg, partly because of what he came back from with that hunting accident, being shot in the chest, and his fortitude in finding his way back.
And the 89 Tour was a testament to that, wasn't it?
Exactly that. So Greg LeMond, as a tactician, goes towards our Frankenstein of an ultimate cyclist, which you can check out on our Instagram page at Sir Brad's Cafe. And tell us, were we right to choose, or was I right to choose Greg LeMond over Laurent Fignon as the best tactician the sport has ever seen? Stephen, we've got to ask you a couple of quick-fire questions before we let you go. First of which is, what keeps you in love with cycling?
I think at the moment, there has been ups and downs, but I always kind of find an excuse for the downs when the riders aren't performing or not doing the way I think it should be performing. But I think it's an incredible sport, and what keeps me involved in it, and what keeps me in love with it, is the fact that anybody can ride a bike. There's no, it's very difficult to go out on a football and play with Ronaldo on a football field, whereas you can go along on the bike, you can meet anybody on the side of the road, anybody can meet you, whether it be a Bradley Wiggins, a Pogacar, or whatever. I mean, it's the great thing about cycling, and all these stars of yesterday, they all have time for the public, for their fans. And that, I think, it's a credit to the guys themselves, because it's very easy to forget where you came from. And I think that when you're up there on a high, winning races, you're happy when people are coming along and applauding you. But at the same time, you may say, well, didn't do me any good. I didn't need anybody's applause. But at the same time, if nobody's there applauding you, you'll definitely miss it. So I think it's a great payback for fans when they can meet their stars. And what I love about the sport is that you have these sportives now, or retro events or whatever, where you can go along and you can meet people from your generation, whether bike riders or fans. And what I love about the sport is this mix of everybody, different generations. Everybody has respect for each other and what we've achieved. And I love the apart from the physical side of it, I wouldn't do any other sport.
And because stopping at a cafe is so steeped in the traditions of cycling, what would you order at a cafe on your bike? What's your order? What coffee would you order?
I would order myself a cappuccino, a scone with some cheese and raspberry jam.
Nice. And what's your favourite cafe? Do you have a favourite at the moment?
Well, there was one I used to go to in the Surrey Hills. I forgot the name of it now.
Giro. It's not Giro, is it?
Giro Cafe used to go to on an Esher. But I love the cafes in UK because they always have the buns warm with the cottage cheese and jam.
Right.
Old
There's
school.
a few in Ireland now as well that are becoming more acquainted with cyclists, and they put on a good show as well. So that's what my main recipe would be when I go to a cafe.
Am I right in saying you were once interested in buying a cake shop? Was that part of the grand plan for you?
No, I was getting involved with a guy who's had 6 or 7 cake shops, but cut a long story short, I nearly ended up on the wrong side of the bars, because they were actually, I didn't know this, but the guys were actually avoiding paying their taxes and everything else, and selling cakes was great, but the police stopped our project before we got too far, which is good.
Well, thank you, Stephen, once again for joining us at Cafe Aficionado. We should do a quick call to action for the socials before we go, Brad, and say please do follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Cafe Aficionado. Watch us on YouTube at Sir Brad's Cafe. Join us on all the usual social media platforms. Same again at Sir Brad's Cafe. And tell us what your favourite cake stop, coffee stop, and whatever your order is, let us know.
Let's do it. Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you, Bradley.
Thank you, mate. Cheers, Stephen. So that's it for another episode of Cafe Aficionado. Thank you, Graham, once again. Thank you to Stephen, and thank you for coming to Cafe Aficionado. Join us next time for another episode. See you then.